progress.
Thanks, John. Hello again, everyone. My name is David Myers, and on behalf of the Center for Independent Living in Toronto, CILT, I'd like to give you all a warm, grateful welcome for joining us in marking this year's Black History Month in Canada at today's panel conversation, From Resistance to Resilience, Combating Oppression as Black Disabled People in Toronto. CILT is honored to center Black disabled people's lives every Black History Month, and we're thrilled to have with us today 4 panelists who will share insightful reflections and their lived expertise of disability and Blackness in Toronto. We'd like to thank them all in advance. They'll be speaking later on in the program, but shout out to Rehan Benaga, Tico Gabriel, Ben Akuko, and Joanne Marcano. I'm your co-MC for today's event and the Senior Manager for Independent Living Programs at CILT. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a Black disabled man and a longtime settler in Toronto on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I have short salt and pepper here. I'm wearing eyeglasses and a light blue long sleeve shirt. Sharing co-MC duties with my wonderful colleague, Joella, who will now introduce herself. Joella?
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Joella Knopf, and I'm happy to be here with you all today. Like David, I live here in Toronto. I'm a first-generation Canadian of Afro-Caribbean descent. I am a Black woman with a disability. My pronouns are she and her. I have shoulder-length dreadlocks, and today I'm wearing a dark gray sweater and silver hoop earrings. And again, grateful to be here today, and thanks to everyone for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, Joella. Next slide. We're now going to ground today's event with first a land acknowledgement, which I'll read, followed by an African ancestral acknowledgement that Joella will read. So we acknowledge that we're all joining virtually, so maybe on different treaty lands, and that CILT is located in Toronto, the territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We recognize the harmful impacts of historical genocide, ongoing colonization, and racism committed against Indigenous people, and that those of us who are settlers owe a deep debt of gratitude to Indigenous people for the opportunity to live, play, and work on this land. We stand in solidarity with generations of Indigenous people and commit to advancing reconciliation, action on 94 calls to action, and the creation of a more equitable and just and inclusive Ontario for all, especially for those who endure multiple intersecting forms of oppression, particularly Indigenous, Black, and other racialized people with disabilities. This land is also part of the District 1 Spoon Territory, a treaty between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabe, and allied nations to peaceably share and care for this land. All those who come to live and work here are responsible for honoring this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Miigwech. And I pass it on to you, Joella. Thanks, John.
Thanks, David. So for our African ancestral acknowledgement, I'll just read it out. So it says, we acknowledge those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in the generations past, and of those who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and enslavement. We pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent and thank them for their contributions towards transforming systems in ways that promote everyone's sense of belonging and safety.
Next slide. So before we launch into the program, we wanted to share some session guidelines. We always do these prior to going into the formal part of the program. So access supports ASL English interpretation and card captioning are being provided today. Our interpreters are Joanne and Christopher, and our captioner is Galen. For privacy and time management, everyone will be muted and no video except for the hosts until the Q&A section at the end. We'll be recording the Zoom webinar, but we'll stop recording at the Q&A. Messages in the chat and Q&A will only go to the host and co-host to accommodate people with screen readers. This is because they hear all of the chatter that goes on if we have the stream, the chat enabled. I'll be moderating chat questions during the Q&A while Joella moderates the spoken questions. I will be taking both during the Q&A. And we'll give more additional information at that time. Given our conversation's topic, we share a content warning here. For anyone who feels triggered in any way, please feel free to step away for self-care. This is an access-friendly space, and so people are free to come and go based on their access needs. And if you wish for any peer support, please select John Massa, who is the host today in the chat box, and he will try to offer assistance. We plan to co-create an anti-oppressive space where everyone is treated respectfully. So we may remove anyone from the room who displays overt acts of discrimination, including racism, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, or sexism, to name a few. Next slide. Turn it over to you, Joella.
Thank you, David. So just a brief overview of the agenda for this afternoon. We'll start the event rolling with a welcome and a few remarks from our Executive Director, Wendy Porch. After that, we will have some history on the theme and overall brief history about Black History Month in Canada, profiling a few community leaders with disabilities and some trailblazing they set for some of the work we're trying to do today. Followed by that, we will have a panel conversation with our amazing guests who've come to join us today to share their perspectives and lived experiences. And then after that, we will have some opportunity for questions and answers, followed by wrap-up and thank yous for the event.
Hi,
so
everybody.
With that, I'll bring it over to Wendy. Sorry, Wendy, I accidentally muted myself.
No worries. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Wendy Porch, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Center for Independent Living in Toronto, also known as CILT. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a white, cisgendered, disabled woman with long brown hair. And today I'm wearing a black and white striped shirt. I am deeply honored to welcome you to our 2025 Black History Month event, From Resistance to Resilience, Combating Oppression as Black Disabled People in Toronto. Today, we are privileged to hear from esteemed panelists who will share their invaluable insights and lived experiences with us. A warm thank you to Rayanne, Joanne, T-Cal, and Ben for being members of our panel today for this important conversation. Our goal is to collectively acknowledge the intersection of Blackness and disability and to work towards a future of justice, equity, and inclusion together. So thank you for joining us for this important conversation. Welcome again, and we are happy to have you all here. And let's embark on this journey together. And I'm also here to listen and to learn today. So I'll start by telling you a little bit more about CILT, about our organization. We're rooted in the Nothing About Us Without Us disability rights movement. and we are a community-based resource center run by people with disabilities for people with disabilities. We work towards building a society where disabled people can access social and economic equity, justice, and full societal inclusion. CILT programs include our information and referral program, our volunteer program. We have a range of peer supports. We also have a quite rare parenting with a disability program and network, independent skills training. We are the host of the Attendance Service Application Center, the direct funding program provincially. We are also the administrators for that, the IDE+A project, as well as the GTA Disability Coalition. And if you're interested in knowing more about CILT, you can certainly check out our website or get in touch with us and let us know. So thank you again for being here today, and a warm thank you to all of our panelists today too.
Thanks, Wendy. Appreciate that warm welcome. So we wanted to do just a little bit of a snapshot of some of the history of Black History Month in Canada. Most people in the room have hopefully been to some Black History Month events over the years. And so we don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but just a little bit of a snapshot. Every February, people across Canada mark Black History Month through events and festivities that honor the lives, the struggles, and legacy of Black people in Canada and their diverse communities. In Canada, Black History Month was officially recognized in 1995 after a motion by the then Honorable Jean Augustine, who was the first Black woman elected to Canada's Parliament. Black Canadians and their communities have been part of shaping Canada's heritage and identity since the arrival of Matthew da Costa, a navigator and interpreter, whose presence in Canada dates to the early 1600s. The role of Black people in their communities in Canada has largely been ignored as a key part of Canada's history. Even now, that continues to be an issue in our community. There's little mention that some of the loyalists who came here after the American Revolution and settled in the Maritimes were people of African descent, nor the fact that many soldiers of African descent made their sacrifices in wartime as far back as the War of 1812. Few people in Canada know African people who were once enslaved in the territory that is now known as Canada, or of how those who fought enslavement helped to lay the foundation of Canada's diverse and inclusive society. And, at this event, as we're centering Black people with disabilities, we also know that Black disabled people are very much excluded in a lot of the formal and informal events and activities around this time of year, Black History Month. So we hope this is an opportunity today to center our community within this context, and we'll do that at during our panel. So next slide. Off to you, Joella. We're going to highlight a couple of what we call champions as Black people, and we'll be sending out some resources after the event. We'll share some profiles of some other champions in our community we won't have time to share about today.
Thank you, David. So as David was saying, we just want to take some time to highlight a couple people. There are many along the way, many that are here today. So in the context of, Canada, we felt it was really important to share about Jean Augustine, at least a little snippet. She is the one who really pushed for us to have Black History Month in Canada. So this is why we celebrate this in February. And it's thanks to her. So she was the former member of Parliament, and she introduced the motion in the House of Commons, and it officially took effect in 1996. So because of her work pushing in Parliament to have at least some time of the year, we make a dedicated effort to highlight the contributions of Black Canadians and others from the diaspora we celebrate this month. And the Black History Act month was passed as well in Ontario in 2016. So Jean Augustine in her own right also made some history, being the first Black woman elected to Canada's Parliament, serving from 1993 to 2006. She's had a lot of successes in terms of Parliament and as well as legislatively. And in her words, I really like this quote, so we included it, that we must show up and be counted alongside today's champions. We must stand up in the face of transgression and injustice. We must speak up on important matters that could use another healthy voice. So, leaving off with just some words and impressions to take away from Ms. Jean Augustine, but she is one of the big pioneers for in terms of Canadian context for the celebration of Black history. So with that, I'll bring it back over to David.
Thank you all.
No problem.
So we could have profiled a number of Black people with disabilities who are champions in our community, particularly in Toronto. But when we had time for one, we decided to select one person who is somebody who has been working for a number of years in our community and has engaged on the intersections of Blackness, disability, gender identity, women's issues, and is someone who CILT has partnered with on a number of initiatives and events over the years. And so we thought it fitting to share about one champion, Ingrid Palmer. So Ingrid Palmer, she, her, is a Black woman with low vision who resides in Toronto. An award-winning speaker and a best-selling author. She is the ideal chief officer at Realize and is a graduate of New York University and Harvard Business School. As a Black visually impaired former foster kid, Ingrid experienced from childhood ableism, anti-Black racism, gender-based violence, and made it her life's mission to drive systemic change. She's informed sector and global platforms on women's empowerment, disability justice, and youth resilience, just to name a few, and serves on a council of Canadians with Disabilities at present and Black Voices United. Ingrid also raised community awareness on the intersections of Blackness, disability, and other marginalized identities in print and broadcast news, such as the Toronto Star. She's been on breakfast television and a number of other broadcast and print media. Ingrid tirelessly partnered in the work of disability-led organizations, including ours, and so we're honored to call her a friend, particularly during this Black History Month. As I said before, we'll share some more profiles in the resources we'll send. So thanks for allowing me to actually share this. Next slide. Next slide, please.
Yeah, this is the next slide.
Thanks. Great. This happens when you have two slide decks open at the same time. So we're going to be getting to our panel conversation. And it centers on two of the core themes of 2025 Black History Month celebration in Canada: resistance and resilience. We hear a lot about resilience, but the history of Black disabled people in Canada involves a whole lot of resistance on multiple levels that we'll get into soon. And to have one, we need to have the other. So reflecting on four key questions that we tasked the panelists with, they'll share their views and their lived expertise, because for many of them, they've lived a lot of what they're going to talk about with us today, on major oppressions that many Black disabled people in Toronto experience. And this is Black people of different identities. So in the queer community, in the trans community, newcomers, etc. And the acts of resistance and systemic change and allyship that they see as needed to increase our community's access to justice inclusion, and resilient lives. So with that, turn things over to Joella, who's going to be actually introducing our esteemed panelists. Joella, I turn it over to you.
Ready. Thank you, David. And thank you again to our panelists for joining us today. Before we get into those questions that David mentioned, we just want to take a few minutes to formally give a little bit of background and introduction to everybody, just so they have some highlights of who will be speaking with us today. So as mentioned earlier, we do have Ben Akuko with us. He's a specialist of advocacy education at the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. Ben is a passionate advocate for highlighting the intersectionality of race, culture, and disability through public speaking, consulting, and media appearances. As a proud Black man of Ghanaian descent living with retinitis pigmentosa, he draws on his personal experiences to amplify underrepresented voices. Currently, Ben serves on the Council of Canadians with Disabilities and is an original member of the CNIB's Black Voices United group. He also participates in several coalitions focused on raising awareness around race and disability. So welcome, Ben. We also have Rayanne Banaga joining us as well. She is a researcher at Race and Disability Canada, and is currently working on the Culture and Diversity and Inclusion Research Project. As a part of this project with RDC, she's leading an ambitious research initiative to understand how culture shapes disability in 11 countries and cultures globally. She has contributed to and published research on the experiences and challenges of Black communities in mental health settings, and founded Surviving Together to address the gaps in mental health care for underserved populations. So welcome to you as well, Rayanne. We also have Tikal Gabriel joining us. Tikal is a professor at the School of Social and Community Services at George Brown College. As a registered social worker and community researcher in the development sector, her work focuses on addressing the intersectional needs and limited inclusion of Black, Indigenous, and racialized people with disabilities in services, programs, and policies. She brings many years of experience in the social service sector, specializing in building and sustaining community partnerships to deliver frontline advocacy, as well as in program design, delivery, and evaluation. She is also an equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility consultant. So welcome, Tikal. And we also have, lastly, joining with us today, Joanne Morcano. Joanne is a first-generation Black Canadian mother with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis since childhood, and is a dedicated advocate for systemic change. Joanne was featured by the Arthritis Society in 2023. Joanne has spoken at Building Black Futures Through Literacy event, the George Brown College International Day of Persons with Disabilities event in 2024, presenting her perspective on the lack of accessibility in healthcare settings, as well as providing insight to the University of Calgary's Equity and Canadian Rheumatology Association Guidelines project. So welcome to everyone, and again, thank you for joining us. And with that, we will move into our first question, 1 of 4, and I will say I'll leave it up for whoever wants to be the brave ones to go first. I didn't really have a particular order, so I'll put out the question, and whichever one of you would like to lead off, please feel free once I read out the question. So how do you navigate the intersectionality of your lived experience of Blackness and disability identities in our society? You're free to provide any examples if you wish, or anything that you feel will be helpful to share based on your comfort level. Do you have any takers to go first?
I can go first.
Thank you, Joanne.
Okay, great question. I think sometimes I'm navigating through society. Other times I feel like I'm bobbing and weaving. Other times I'm feeling like I'm barely getting through spaces. Most of the time, I like to say that I'm navigating being Black and having a disability like a fearless queen, ready to take on any space and anyone. And I feel like I do. However, I do, um, I'm mindful in certain spaces, if we take as being a Black mom, in the education space, I'm mindful that in that space, I may need to do more listening and observing because I recognize that my words may be filtered by biases, um, biased ears, I should say, in regards to Blackness, my strength, my passion, my enthusiasm as I'm speaking about my kids or about my own thoughts may be filtered and may be perceived as aggression, that angry Black woman. Um, so I'm very mindful of that. I'm also very privileged that unless I walk, a lot of people don't even recognize that I have arthritis or I have 2 hip replacements. So that in itself comes with a lot of challenges. And I often think about, should I disclose that I maybe need support? Should I not? Um, and will people believe me? Because I don't necessarily fit the different perspectives of disability. Um, but I'm at a place in my journey where I know I belong in any space and I'm confident and comfortable in asking for support and speaking up for myself. I'm confident in speaking up for others where I can who may feel unseen, unheard, or unvalued or undervalued, sorry. So really, I'm just navigating daily. It's almost like a balancing act. Sometimes I'm on it, and other times I need a minute and have somebody else carry me, and I'm okay to take that. But whichever way I do navigate, I do so with intention. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. And as a Black mother as well with a disability, I really feel what you're saying. I've had, as you know, several, journeys along the path of the education system so far with my 2 kids. So I really resonate with a lot of what you're saying and also being, cognizant of like what I say, my intention when I step in, not carrying maybe some of my worries or like my experiences, with my kids, although I do see a lot of similarities as well. So really thank you for sharing that. Anyone else want to take a go at the question or perspective or anything on the heels of Joanne?
Sure, I'll jump in, and thank you so much, Joanne, for sharing your perspective, and thank you, Dwella, for the warm welcome and team. So I have experience navigating a special education system, but I am a proud caregiver to loved ones with disabilities. And oftentimes, we're taught that there are resources and supports that are available to support us with our navigation, support disabled community members as well as their caregivers. However, I quickly learned that such disability supports are often deeply rooted in anti-Black racism, and myself and community must continuously find ways to navigate and resist to survive. So we always have conversations on, the system not being equitable, but really the system is operating in ways in which it was intended to operate. So it's doing exactly what it was intended to do, and it was never designed for us. So we have and continue to resist such systems by, for myself and community, just collectively working on building strong, supportive, care and love, within ourselves and the community members we're able to serve. So, just being very intentional about seeking spaces and creating informal spaces on the intersections on which, the intersections of Blackness and disabilities are really seen, appreciated, treated with care. That has really been core to my resilience building, and that's what keeps me going. So, for example, finding others in the community who are Black and feel safe identifying as disabled and or caregivers to Black disabled family members has been a huge part as to how I navigate various spaces. But, just that mindset as well of like understanding that those who are not disabled are temporarily able-bodied, because we're all going to experience disability at some point in our lives. And, that just continues to expand my understanding of how disability is really never an individual issue, but a community reality.
Thank you, Tikal, for that insight. And also knowing like, even though, yes, there might be some resources, how that works for the individuals that it's seeking to support might be well-intentioned, sometimes you have to play that champion and give the other side of the coin, being the one that's supposed to be receiving the support. So thank you for sharing a lot of that perspective as well. I don't know, Ben or
Yeah.
Rayanne wanted to speak up next on the question.
Yeah.
Okay, so Rayanne, you're unmuted. Thank you.
I think like very clumsily, I think, and with a lot of community support is how I do it. So it's kind of hard to put words to this because I don't think I necessarily navigate the intersection of being Black and disabled. I just am, but I do navigate the the intersectional oppression of racism and ableism. And those things create like, very real and tangible barriers. But what I also know is that those barriers are based on misconceptions about what we can and can't do, and on lies about our inherent value. So to me, the first step to challenging those barriers tangibly is to reject those ideas and refuse to believe them. I also reject the idea that the problem is my Blackness or my disability, but the problem is actually structural racism and ableism. And even though I'm part of all of these different minority groups, the reality is that, oppressed people are a majority in this world. So our community is really big, and so many people are constantly building alternatives to the oppressive structures. Um, I always think about wherever there is oppression, there is resistance to it, and so my survival and my existence kind of depends on finding those spaces and communities where that resistance is happening.
Thank you, Rayanne. And also opening up that perspective of, seeing what else is out there. I know a lot of the time we're busy just trying to make it in, daily life and all of that, but part of that is also knowing what's out there, educating yourself where you can, working on those support networks, which I know looks different for everybody. But thank you for bringing that perspective. Ben, your thoughts on this question?
Of course. Thank you. And such wonderfully said before me by the other panelists, and just totally agree with it. And I find navigating these spaces as a person who lives with blindness myself, as well as a Black male, it's definitely a journey of just like said before, a lot of stumbling and a lot of acquiring information as I go on and as I get older and older. So it's very important to create that tribe and have people who have similar circumstances as you and have an ability to listen to their stories as well as express my own stories. So to know how to navigate the communities that we go upon. And education is very, very key. Like having that knowledge side of when we are going through these spaces, such as this panel as well, and just learning every day, because I think one of the most important things of when you have that intersect of a person who's Black and lives with a disability is you want to bring your full self to everything you do and things that you do. So it's very important to have that acceptance, and then also the intersect of being a Black male, knowing that living with a disability, that you do have to be vulnerable, and it's okay to be vulnerable because as mentioned in the beginning, it helps that resiliency and it helps that pushback of anti-oppressive practices and structural racism.
Thank you, Ben, for that, for sharing your perspective. As you know, how we know in the question we said navigate, so I use that word, but navigate, stumble, however we want to frame it to get to where we want to be, what we need as we try to find what's right for us, and that includes working, and building those relationships with others and that feeling of acceptance, which, at least in my experience, has offered me a lot of encouragement. Support networks are really important, having that education piece. So thank you for sharing your perspective. So with that, I'll turn it over to David to go on to our second question of the discussion for the afternoon.
Thanks. Well, if folks have kind of talked about some of the aspects of the question I'm going to ask in a second, navigation of oppression is a common theme in all of your stories, all of your narratives, really. And and the idea that the system is operating as designed, the oppressive structures are operating as designed, and you have to navigate through those oppressive structures. Every day you head into society. So the second question really speaks a bit to that, but you folks gave some very specific responses in your preparation for this. So looking forward to hearing what you have to say. What current oppressions do you think Black disabled people currently face in our society today? It's a part A and part B, but I want to leave the part B separate because it's very specific to the Black community, the Black community at large. So, what are some of the oppressions, and maybe can you speak a bit more specifically about some of the oppressions and how they impact Black disabled people? You can speak personally as well as speaking sort of structurally.
And this is,
Go ahead, Ben.
yes, so one of the things definitely is accessibility for sure. And I would say accessibility catered to uh, other people's identities. So
Mm.
sometimes in when we look at accessibility, we find that accessibility is built for one type of person and then excludes other individuals. So maybe spaces which are Black communities or Black environments, and accessibility is not spoken about. So I really believe that we should be involved in these conversations. And then when we're working with the broader organizations, cross-disability organizations, that we're able to identify some of the accessible barriers, whether it is attitudinal or actually a built environment, and having that ability to actually discuss it as individuals who utilize these environments. So it's very, very key that we do have that forest bias coming from that Black perspective.
So accessibility, as we talk about it in our community, is across the board, regardless of your intersectionality, you are dealing with accessibility barriers. But then you layer on top of that being a Black person. You're saying basically that's another layer of oppression you have to deal with and you need to think about. So thanks for sharing that, Ben. Let's go next.
I can go next. Just to kind of build on what Ben said, I thought that was really beautifully said. But so I think there's a lot of examples. I could go on a lot of tangents. So to reel myself in, I think it was easier to choose two themes that I can speak to. And the first one is exclusion. You know, Black people, we are excluded from like popular understandings of disability. We're excluded from the research. There's so much research about how the human body works where not a single Black person was included in the study, or research about illnesses and impairments where not a single Black person was included. So there's a lot of ignorance and a lot of like a lack of support for our needs because that research doesn't exist. Um, we're also excluded from the representation of what disability looks like and feels like, which really limits our access to the few resources and supports that do exist for people with disabilities. And in those spaces, we're less often referred to specialized support services when we need them because our needs aren't actually understood. And culture shapes so much of how we receive and offer support, and that's often erased. Like the language that Black people use to describe our own experiences of disability are often invalidated or misunderstood. And that leads to, you know, being discriminated against, treated badly, and again, excluded from accessing support. So we're often really erased from visibility because of, you know, social and professional spaces are not accessible. And like that leads to so much isolation. And then the other theme that I think ties in with that is exposure. Uh, this is also intertwined with the other intersections because it's structural, systemic. Black and Indigenous communities are statistically exposed to more disabling environments like dangerous work environments and polluted communities. And those have a disabling impact on us. So we are more likely to become disabled and much earlier than other demographics. We're exposed to stressors like poverty and housing insecurity, which are also disabling factors. And then that works vice versa as well. Like having an existing disability makes you more likely to experience housing instability and food insecurity. So Black people with disabilities are on like this systemic level, just exposed to an increased level of these like compounding barriers.
Thanks so much, Rayanne. We hear a lot in our Black communities about structural racism in healthcare and inequities in healthcare. And for people who are Black and disabled, those structural inequities are multiplied because you have to layer in ableism there as well, factors in for a lot of, as we all know, we'll talk about, makes that oppression even more multiplied for folks. And so you spoke really to structural and systemic issues, which are a really key part of the oppression they experience. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Sorry, no.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Joe.
Sure.
Oh, thank you, Tikal. Thanks, Rayanne and Ben, for speaking to actually what I was going to mention. So thank you for starting that. So I'm just going to jump into an example because everything you said in regards to healthcare and everything, I was going to highlight as well. So an example with this question, I was in grade 4. And I was attending a elementary school. So in grade 4, I happened to have a flare up with my juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, JRA. I wasn't able to walk, high fevers, various things. So through various supports with the rheumatologist and the supports that were in place, it was recommended that I go to Hugh McMillan. Now, anybody in Toronto, Hugh McMillan has now been renamed and is Holland Bloorview. So I would be picked up by a taxi every day, Monday to Friday, traveled over to Holland Bloorview and back home. It was intense physiotherapy, intense occupational therapy, but there was also a school that was in there as well. So I actually went to school from grade 4 to grade 8 at Hugh McMillan at the time. So eventually I started to do well, went into remission, and it was time I can enter back into the regular school system. And for grade 9 in high school. Now, when I got there, I remember meeting with the guidance counselor, and one of when someone asks, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" I don't even remember what age it was, but I want to be a family lawyer. I walked into the guidance counselor. I want to be a family lawyer. Anywhere I could turn, that's what I wanted to be. So it was said from the beginning. So with that enrolling, picking your courses, I was put into an ISP class for math and English from leaving Hugh McMillan. So I do not know if there was communication between Holland Bloorview educators and the guidance counselor or the teachers at my high school, but whichever, I was put in at during about September, maybe about halfway through the semester, the teachers in the ISP class are asking, "Why are you here? Like, you don't need to be here. You're doing the workload. You don't need extra help. You can actually sit in the regular class." I'm giving quotations, sorry, regular class for math and English. So anyways, so with all of that to be said, I was integrated back into it, into the regular classes. What they didn't know, or what was never discussed, was that I was reading. I can read. I would read novels and books on that long drive from home to Hugh McMillan in the cab. I was reading. What else I didn't know is that when you grow up in a Black, West Indian, Caribbean, African home, the foundation of the family is faith. They do not have faith in the education system. My mother all the time would say, "I don't know what kind of education system. I don't know what you're learning in class." Because being from Trinidad, she grew up with a British education system. So it was always questioned, what were we learning here? And so we were always reading the Bible. We had to pronounce, we had to be able to recall verses. We had to know that when we spoke up in front of church, we knew that we weren't about, number one, to make her look shame, but number two, we had to know. So we were doing that. When it came to math, we were doing math in the home and we didn't even know it was math lessons. So even though somewhere someone thought, oh, she's coming from Holland Bloorview, not a real school,
Hmm.
let's put her in to ISP classes. So anyways, fast forward, we get to where it's time to grade 12, time to pick courses to go to university or college. I run to the guidance counselor. Okay, what do I need to take? What university do I go to? It's lawyer time. She said, well, you can't be a lawyer. You took advanced in general subjects. But I told you when I got here in grade 9 that I wanted to be a family lawyer. So that was done. So I had to look for ways in order to get back into law. I remember they said, okay, well, take this test. And when you take this test, we can see what you scored to determine what occupation you can get into. Again, didn't know any different. I think my mom was just happy that I could actually be in school because it meant I was better. But these are the type of ways in which we still see today when you have multi-sectors, when you have maybe healthcare with education or just education, that if both hands aren't clapping, we really aren't providing person-centered support.
Great story, Joanne. Stories are powerful to illustrate just the impact of those kinds of oppressions. So thanks for sharing that. I'm aware it's 1:54, so we have about 25 minutes left. And so there's a lot of great information you have to share. I want to ask people to kind of 2.5 to 3 minutes, and I'm going to try and check so we get through in time to have a good, robust Q&A at the end. But thanks so much, Joanne. It's a great story. So
Thank
that
you.
leaves Pico.
Yes, thank you for sharing such a powerful story, Joanne.
Yeah.
And like, you know, what many of my community members have so beautifully highlighted, you know, like just drawing that attention to, like, due to the history of prolonged oppression, Black peoples are more susceptible to experiencing disabilities within that early stage of life through disproportionate exposure of underdeveloped living. So such understanding really allows us to engage in understanding different relationships with disabilities. But, you know, systems really interlock to create unique oppressive experiences. And when talking about systems and structures, you know, for the sake of time, I really want to touch briefly on policing and healthcare. So, you know, with policing, we have continuously had to witness or read on the inhumane, gruesome murders of our Black disabled community members through the media. So, you know, as a caregiver to a Black young man who is autistic and nonverbal, his disability is very much invisible until you have conversations with him, until you initiate conversation engagement. However, what is noticeable is his race. His height, he stands 6'4". His size, he weighs up, you know, around 200 pounds. You know, that work to really construct notions of a threat, making him more susceptible to experiencing physical and mental harm. So I know he is a disabled Black man, young man, who does not have the privilege, for example, to roam the mall by himself and, you know, pick up a random item to look at or a snack as he would normally do without the risk of a worker possibly calling the cops out of fears he is shoplifting. So this call, of course, would mean that he would be more likely to be met with excessive physical force due to a limited understanding of one, autism, and also, you know, acts of anti-Black racism. So a part of my care work also ensures making sure he is not in the wrong places at the wrong time. That would be very lethal to his life. And this is, you know, oftentimes a reality that I and so many other Black caregivers must live with. And it takes a profound emotional and mental toll. And you know, it really intersects even with our healthcare system that so many of my community members have already touched on. But, you know, Black people's experiences navigating that system of being dismissed, underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed, poor communication with providers, lack of representation and culturally safe care are all brief examples, you know, the ways in which anti-Black racism and ableism and colonialism is deeply rooted within our healthcare system. So, you know, as a provider within the developmental sector, it's often very common. I come across many community service providers, for example, that share They have many Black families navigate suspected diagnosis, but do not have the resources to obtain an official diagnosis. Or when they have an official diagnosis, they receive little supports of where to go next, limited culturally appropriate support for coping and understanding a developmental diagnosis. So this really emphasizes the continuous barriers to access and culturally appropriate care.
Wow. Pretty powerful stuff, Tico. Thanks for unpacking that. Policing Black lives is a huge issue in our community, for sure. Thanks for touching on that because it's critical. Appreciate it. And then I think Ryan, are you the fourth on this question? Have we gone through all four of
Are
you?
we on A or B?
We're still on A. We're still on A.
Okay. Yeah, no, I did A first. I think
Okay.
moving to the next one.
So B, what are some barriers to inclusion and equity the Black disabled people experience in our engagement with Black communities? You have a powerful thing to say about this topic. So who wants to go first?
Joanne, I could go first. Briefly, it's unfortunate because sometimes the barriers are with our own people, within our own Black community, within our own families. Sometimes, often, disability in the Black community is rooted in shame, fear, and also lack of awareness, continued lack of awareness. Uh, Black communities and Black families are usually targeted, shunned, sometimes within wherever our home land is or where our community, our cultural community is based. In our lack, it could be based on lack of spiritual or religious connection, or it's the mom's fault. It's what their ancestors have done. It's where they've lived. That can also be very difficult to navigate and see support. But that too is always obviously rooted in colonialism as well, of why that is. So yeah, just to keep it brief, I will leave it there.
Thanks, Joanne. Appreciate that.
And then it's Ben speaking.
Go ahead.
Really amazing observation. And another thing is almost rebuilding the definition of disability when we look at our Black communities. And something that I really think of a lot is even something as simple as language. So even with my parents, their second language is Twi of that's Ghana, a dialect from Ghana. And there's not even a word for disability. And I remember even the translation of family friends, when they refer to me, it'd be abnormal, right? And I think that's something that we have to look into, something as simple as language, something as simple as, I wouldn't say even calling out, but more so educating that there's different words to use within cultural identities. And I know even with other Caribbean cultures, some people are given nicknames that could be offensive as well. And same with the African culture. So I think it is an opportunity to kind of band and educate that like we need words to show the empowerment of disability and show that combination of resiliency. Because I think one of the most important things is that us as Black folk with disabilities, especially coming from immigrant parents, is we have an extra uh, built-in resiliency coming from seeing our parents in the different countries and how they had to work hard to get to where they are, plus adding on that disability. So I feel that we have to reconstruct and rejig how languages when it comes to when we're referred to from our own culture. And then another aspect that I want to bring up quickly is the fact that we have to stop making uh, being a person who's Black and lives with a disability as a subculture, because I mentioned before with police brutality and even hate crimes, is the fact that when we are exposed to these hate crimes or these things that are happening to our people, we're still affected too. It isn't any different from an able-bodied person as well. And we're actually, as mentioned before, even more vulnerable and more exposed to these hate crimes and uh, brutality from wherever. So I think it's very important that we come as a collective with a Black community and know that these are not subcultures and we're not uh, far away from what's going on as even an able-bodied person as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. That's a really good point, eh? There's that sort of a separation between Black communities and disabled Black people. And I know in the last question, you're going to talk about what can be done to make change happen. And you all have really practical things to share at that point about what can be done to reduce those exclusions, both within the community, but also between the community and the structures and other societal systems. So thanks very much for that, Ben. Tico
So,
or
sorry, Anne, I can go.
Ryan?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I'll speak to like the structural and systemic because mostly I think that like there are a lot of the interpersonal barriers, but they're also really informed by the structural failures. So I think it's important to name like the influence of colonization on how we interact with each other in our communities. I think that's one of like the biggest harms. Um, the stigma and taboo surrounding disabilities, whether it's talking about it or identifying ourselves as having a disability. And the stigmatizing responses to people with disabilities are definitely something that I think, are a huge barrier amongst ourselves. But I think it's important also to put into context that a lot of Black communities prior to colonization and still even now in a lot of ways like we're collectivists and community oriented care was really ingrained in our ways of interacting with each other, but being oppressed means like not having that structural powers. We don't have the funds that we need to make our spaces accessible. We don't have enough people in leadership positions with the power to be able to implement accessibility policies. Like I said earlier too, we're excluded from the research, so we don't even always have accurate information about how people in our communities are marginalized. And also colonization and capitalism inevitably became this more individualistic culture that we have today. And that culture is really focused on productivity. So we've adopted a lot of beliefs and values and like behaviors that, reflect human worth based on our ability to contribute to like, material and economic production. And people with disabilities are often able to contribute to that. And even those of us who can't are still equally important and worthy of being included. But colonization, it wasn't just an idea, it's a really violently enforced thing. And so historically our communities, have adjusted and acclimated to survive, and that had these really, really harmful exclusionary effects that we still see today. And I think that's like where we have to start so that we can challenge it. Like I think it mainly starts with like really reclaiming our own histories and knowledges, imagining new ways of structuring our communities, engaging with each other. And like I think there are like accessibility practices, that we can learn from each other, whether it's looking back or creating new things based on, our own histories and our own knowledge.
Thanks so much. Yeah, the role of colonization is a theme that weaves through all the speaking you've done today, right? And certainly it's easy to blame Black communities for exclusions of Black disabled people, but really, the root of the matter goes back historically to structures, colonization, and racism. So you have some great ideas around that, the answers to question 4. So can't wait to get there. But thanks very much for sharing that structural lens to the problem, Ariane. Appreciate that. And Tico, you can bring it home. The question.
Thank you. And much of what Rayanne shared there is exactly what I'm going to touch on as well.
Great.
So, like when we're speaking on the connection between anti-Black racism and ableism, like we could think of even the ways in which, enslaved Africans who had or developed physical or mental impairments were sold off to medical professionals for medical experiments, or the ways in which enslaved Africans who resisted were pathologized, all signals a deep-rooted traumatic history and complexities on the interconnection of anti-Black racism and ableism. So, we're not always fully aware of how such trauma may be present through our intergenerational transfer, but it can impact some of our Black community members' ability to claim or associate with disabilities, leading to increased stigmatization. So I find that even, for example, when I'm in community doing community engagement sessions within my Afro-Caribbean community, I may not immediately, with this knowledge, I might not immediately enter, using the term disability based on, how it has been received, right? So rather, I might have to adjust and use terms such as differences to allow for safer digestion. But this is often just a reality that we encounter within our community and has profound impacts on members who are disabled, who are currently disabled. So I think, also when we think, when we think about like our community's push for this need to be strong, and we see this especially, with our men, where like help-seeking behavior is viewed to equate weakness. So thinking about how, a disabled Black man can experience detrimental and mental health impacts when needing to require more care. But the truth is that that's the idea of independence is a really Western idea that's rooted in ableism and colonialism. And challenging this really requires us, to really dig into our traditional community understanding and practices that are really built on care and codependence that have been disrupted through enslavement and oppression. And like one community saying that I can appreciate is the Ubuntu philosophy, and that is, I am because you are. So, and that's grounded in the interconnectedness of humanity. So I think we must continue to be intentional in the ways that we revitalize our practice, our traditional practice for community care.
Thanks so much for that, Tico. Great way to bring that home to us. Appreciate it. Joella, off to you for 3. And then it's now 2:10, so we should be okay with time. Go ahead, Joella.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for your just candidness and thoughtfulness. Everything you've said with such intention so far, such like an in-depth and just well-rounded conversation. So I just wanted to throw that in there. And also just to say a lot of what you said, I think flows perfectly into our third question, which is what can we learn and apply from Black resistance movements and leaders that challenged oppressive systems, laws, and government institutions in Canada? Well, you guys had lots of great things already. Anyone want to start us off with, I guess, kind of continuing the conversation left of what we just discussed with the second question?
Start us off.
Sure, and thank
I'm
you.
just
Go
kind
ahead.
of brief. I'll keep it brief for this one because my was a little long. Um, so I think what I've learned most from, from these movements here is that like building with each other and working laterally and in a solidarity with each other. We're all facing oppression that affects us differently, but the oppressive structures and the forces are the same. So we're working toward the same goals, and that shared vision and shared goal, like that is our biggest strength.
Thank you. And I hear that. I know when we spoke offline, the couple of you I had said the same thing. One thing that can't be discounted is, even though it might be different experiences, there's the commonalities is what brings us together, and there's strength in that. And trying to find a way to work through what we're going through as a people, as Black people, people with disabilities. So thank you for that. Anyone else want to chime in? Tikal, I see you've unmuted, so go with you.
Yes. Thank you. And just to add to my colleague's powerful point there, and just thinking that, Black resistant movements have been a path for Black peoples, we're not a monolith. we're a diverse group to really resist oppressive systems and institutions. But it's way more than Blackness. It's a commitment and it's a fight for all. And I'm a huge James Baldwin fan. But, one thing I really appreciated about James Baldwin's work is the emphasis on the importance of being fueled by love, which is a principle that has been applied within, Black resistance movements that we can learn from. And much of our Black resistance has inspired and been the cornerstone for various movements, including the disability movement. So, just to add to my colleague's point there on the importance of really shared goals and commitment to enhancing and protecting the well-being of marginalized communities also, demonstrates the ways in which various social movements intersect. So, that is my take on that question.
Thank you, Tikal, and for making that connection as well to some of what Rayanne had said. Joanne or Ben want to go next?
This is Ben here. I would say laying the groundwork, and it's such a beautiful thing that there has been people before us to lay that groundwork and for us to continuously build upon what these leaders have put down before us, and having these innovative ideas and having these visions of where we go as individuals who live with disability or a disability, as well as Black individuals. So it's, I would say, hope, resiliency, and that constant determination of how we could change the world and how we could have people who are Black or living with a disability finally at the table to finally speak their piece.
Thank you, Ben. Joanne, anything to add on the heels of what Ben said?
My co-speaker said it so beautifully. I think just to add is validation, that we are allowed to say no, we're allowed to ask questions, we're allowed to use our voices if that's where we are in our journey. And I'm very fortunate that I have a support, whether it be through my parents, through family, through whichever, that I come from some loudmouth individuals that stand firm. My father stood strong against colonialism and colorism in Trinidad. My mother has fought from the beginning to the end in regards to keeping a roof over our heads, racism, ableism in regards to the type of housing we got, to my health care. So with that, I didn't understand it at the time, but with the seed being planted, and as we meet and we see other leaders that validate that we are allowed to set boundaries, we are allowed to navigate and speak on being an expert for ourselves. It has allowed me to be comfortable in my journey where I'm okay doing that. A really quick story, really quick, is when I was pregnant, I had to see this OBGYN. And I had read all the reviews, and they said that he treats people like cattle and just kind of quick in, quick out. And I remember the first visit, it was, okay, Joanne, I'll see you in 2 months. Here's a file, go see my secretary. And I said, and he stood up and I said, I have a question. And he said, oh, and he sat down. 2 months later, the next visit, he does it again. Okay, great. We'll see you in 2 months. Yep, we should do this. Okay, here's the folder. Go see my secretary. I'll see you in 2 months. I have a question. He sits back down. Oh, okay. Third visit, it happens again. Great to see you. We'll see you in 2 months. Closes the folder and says, do you have any questions? Actually, yes, I do. I do have questions. And knowing that I'm okay and I'm allowed to question those that are in various different roles. And I just wanted to share that example because that is something that the seed has been planted and that I've learned that we are allowed to use our voices.
Thank you, Joanne. I think that's a perfect way to end off that question. Sometimes just leading by example, sometimes we have to showcase what we need and see eventually people will follow suit. And in that case, at least after 3 tries, he did. So thank you for sharing that. We have
Thanks,
one
everyone.
more question, which I'll throw over to Dave.
Well, it's been great hearing your lived experiences around anti-Black racism and ableism, and then moving to more specific um, systemic and structural sorts of barriers people experience. And now we want to kind of come to, ideas you have around what change looks like and what resistance and resilience looks like in terms of what can be done. And looking at who registered for this event, just looking at the names on the registration list, a lot of folks in the room who work for power structures. There's folks in the room who work for the federal government. They're working in the provincial government, at the city divisions. They're working in nonprofits, in disability-led organizations. So a lot of folks in the room and orgs represented in the room that can be part of making change happen. Not least of which are allies of Black disabled people. So disabled people themselves who have a lot of ableism barriers, but also can be allies to Black disabled people as well. So the question I have for you is, what are some actionable goals or steps that individuals, nonprofits, government institutions, and others can take to influence progress towards greater resilience and liberation for Black disabled people within our society? That includes allyship and what it can look like. And I've read your answers, and so there's lots of takeaways for folks in the room. So looking forward to you sharing what some of those might be. Do you want this to be a learning experience? People can go back and say, I'll do this differently, in my role with the city, or my role with the province, this is what I can do that's actionable to make a difference in the lives of Black disabled people. What do you have to share? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll jump in there.
Okay.
David, thank you so much for that profound question. I think what comes to mind first and foremost is, the development of integrative and specialized services for communities. So ensuring policy, program, and service developments are really guided from an intersectional lens. That is very key to inclusion work, and also looking to build and sustain community partnerships with community stakeholders. So we're looking at schools, community organizations, faith-based institutions, and so forth, to enhance awareness and acceptance of support resources to reduce cultural stigma regarding developmental and mental health care within our community. But again, going back to that temporarily able body, but understanding that those who are not disabled are only temporarily not disabled, and we will experience disability at some point in our life. And it really demonstrates how disability is a part of our everyday lives, and a part of every facet of society. So therefore, solidarity and allyship continues to be essential. And when thinking about, allyship with Black disabled community members, it's centered around being intentional about learning about their intersectional experiences, understanding your own social location and privilege, and how you can utilize your current privileges to support and amplifying the voices of Black disabled community members, and really being able to listen, to understand, and not to defend. And allyship really involves learning and unlearning and challenging help seeking and savior mentality. So asking yourself difficult questions such as, who is and who is not included in a space and conversation? Who is this initiative intended to support, and is it led by such community? Why did it take hearing a particular concern or idea from this body and voice for me to act on it, despite hearing it, having heard it from others? How do you recognize the work and contributions of Black disabled community members and, Black community members within your space? So I think, as well as I work within post-secondary at George Brown, also looking at implementing intersectional disability justice courses within secondary and post-secondary institutions. And this, believe it or not, it's very much still very new. The development of such courses. So, the systemic analysis is important to really enhance our understanding on the history of Black peoples with disabilities, and being able to look at accommodations, reassessing accommodations, and ensuring that they are, very much individualized, culturally appropriate, and accessible. And, also being a social worker within the developmental sector, looking at targeted funding and resources to expand the capacity of Black-led organizations. And, that key of data collection, how is data being collected to identify the gaps in services for Black disabled community members and their experiences? So those are just some thoughts that came.
There are lots of learning takeaways there, actually, Tico, right? who knows where to start. But you did mention intersectionality and as a key part of this work. I mean, we haven't talked a lot about other identities today beyond disability and Blackness, but we know that disability justice as a movement came out of Black disabled people, primarily in the States, and evolved to several principles in terms of how to actually do justice that centers disabled Black and BIPOC people. So thanks so much. Lots of takeaways you shared there. Let's go next.
I can go next, just Joanne. Thank you, Tikal, for that. I'm going to add some action items related to inviting us to the table. Keep inviting us to the table. Keep ensuring our voices are heard. We're not afterthoughts. We're change makers. We're masterminds. I'm looking at the snow here in Toronto, and every step I take, I have to figure out and navigate how I put my foot up and make sure it's safe. And you're doing the puzzle in your head. So we are change makers. When you, it's not enough to just say that you have a Black individual at the table in order to tick off your diversity box. It's more than just being able to hold up a heart emoji when somebody and say, oh, that's so powerful. You're so inspiring. What does that mean? So are you ready for your next action and for your commitment moving forward? Are you ready to hand in your bystander card? Are you ready, like Tikal said, look around the table and say, wait, we're missing that voice? Are you ready to move to the side, or are you ready to be the one that initiates commitment to change and other commitments among policymakers, change makers within various organizations? I think those are important next steps. And are you willing to recommend? I did have one written down here. Are you willing to recommend and do the research? If you don't know, who are the voices that we need to bring on to ensure that all voices are heard? Thank you.
Thanks so much. A lot of questions for the audience, eh? Are you ready to hand in your allyship card? Are you ready to actually step up and be an ally? Really? And we are change makers. So that means everybody in the room has an opportunity to be a change maker. It's just, what are you going to do? So thanks for that. A bit of a call to action, Joanne, is what you just did, which is what we need, right? A call to action, because it's everybody's responsibility to fight anti-Black racism and ableism. It's not just to be only on Black disabled people. So thanks for centering that message for us. Appreciate it. Okay. Ben or Ariane?
And it is Ben here, and just hearing the takeaways, I'm getting so pumped up, right? Like having this space to speak about how we can make these changes and having such wonderful perspectives, it definitely uh, puts us in a place where we can really, really make some beautiful, beautiful change, right? So the takeaway that a lot has been said, but something that us as organizations, we should embrace the beauty of perspective. And in this circumstance, obviously, persons who are Black living with a disability, and embrace the stories, embrace the experience, embrace the knowledge, embrace literature that you can get from this amazing demographic. And as we go on, and as we have more conversations like this and invite more people to the table, it's just going to be a plethora, a fountain of information that could make us so much better in the community or make us so much better in the work and supports that we deliver. So something so important, like I said, just embrace those perspectives and know that it doesn't just stop, as we all know, it doesn't just stop in February. We have to sprinkle these pretty much these learnings in our everyday practice. So just know that with the services we deliver, with the people we come across, we could easily sprinkle these nuggets of knowledge in the work we do. And I'm, I don't know, I'm so privileged to be in the space with you folks and able to really express our experiences and express our learnings, whether it's academic, whether it's personal, whether it's professional. And these conversations can easily be continued. And definitely, there's people out there, as my colleague before said, there's people out there who are willing to tell these stories and who are willing to research and who are willing to put it in that ether of the world and just make this place better for individuals who are Black and live with a disability. And the beautiful thing about that, just like we said, that triggers other social justice movements as well. So it's like a snowball, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And don't be afraid to join the bandwagon for sure.
Thanks, Ben. To embrace the beauty of perspective and share and build the knowledge together, right? So it takes community to make this happen. So you're saying share the knowledge and collaborate on solutions. Thanks so much. And finally, I'll ask a few minutes and we are going to take a short break. So you get the last response, Rianne, to tie the panel.
I've been thinking about how to make it
Yeah.
short, so I apologize to the interpreters. So I'm gonna shorten it a little bit. But so yeah, when I think of this, I think about the matrix of domination as something that kind of guides like where I can do that work. So it categorizes kind of how oppression is organized in society and explains that using four domains of power that shape our life in society. So these are things that there's something that we can do everywhere in our life, just kind of by looking around at these domains. Um, so in the interpersonal and the individual domain, then like that's where how we interact with each other, the beliefs that we have, and like the individual level changes that we have to make. So I think in that domain, it's like we can make changes in the like some of my colleagues kind of mentioned earlier, like language, being mindful of the language that we're using and the way that we're treating people, and even some of the cultural practices that we, are so used to. Um, and then there's the cultural domain where like the norms in our society and the beliefs that we hold collectively. And that's where we contribute to the standards that we hold each other to as a community. And in that debate, it can be challenging that status quo and like some of the things that we've normalized, like the inaccessible public spaces, and research that is like community led and embraces like these non-Western ways of knowing. Um, in the institutional domain, it's literally looking at our institutions like, schools and healthcare and, the way that we believe in professional conduct and professional practices that we follow, and how, that serves, people with disabilities, Black people with disabilities, the people around us, and what changes we can make there, from, a policy level. And then the structural domain, so like literally like the big stuff like our laws and our governmental policies. And I think there's so many different ways of doing that. Like it might mean supporting representatives who fight for disability justice, like Sarah Jama, but it also might mean challenging laws that aren't equitable. Like I think the work that the land defenders do, where they interrupt and block harmful pipelines from being built, are like that structural change or directly helping to prevent the disablement of Black and Indigenous people who will be harmed by these pipelines. So I think the way that I think about it is that there's work to be done everywhere in our lives. And it's really just about, we all interact with ableism and anti-Blackness every day. So choose one thing in one of these domains that's within your grasp, and then wherever you can, like expand into other domains or just making that one thing bigger.
Thanks so much, Rayanne. What a great way to kind of tie it all together in terms of looking at a framework for how we can look at the problem, but also how we can look at taking action, right? So it's not just one domain, as you call it. It's not just what you can do on a personal level, but there are people in the room here who can do things on a systemic level, or who are within structures who can do things on a systemic level. There are folks in the room who can do things on a structural level based on their context in which they are here today. And there are folks in the room who are, maybe disabled allies who can do things at an interpersonal level. So, and maybe you can do things on more than one level, but certainly there's room for everybody to do something to actually address, what we're talking about, which is really justice and equity and liberation for Black disabled people, which at this point we don't have. So thanks for tying it all together. And thanks everybody. What a wonderful experience. You've given everybody, I hope people agree in the room today with your sharing your perspectives, your stories, your wonderful stories, and of course your analysis of the issue as you see it. So thank you so much for this.